Today's guest is Toby Scrivner, a proud U.S. Navy veteran and senior vice president at Northmarq's Tulsa office, where he also leads the firm's national healthcare group. With over 15 years of expertise in healthcare investment properties, Toby has been a trailblazer in this niche market, helping clients navigate the complexities of commercial real estate with unmatched insight. Today, we sit down with Toby to explore the intricacies of healthcare real estate, including trends, capital strategies, and what it takes to succeed in this dynamic industry.
We need a seamless process that says to a hospital owner, you do this with us, you reduce your expenses by X, increase your revenue by Y. Done. I mean, that's kind of the ultimate model.
Makes sense. So, even as a landlord, I had insurance obligations on the properties that do construction, and even if they're sitting there vacant, I still have to have insurance on them.
Yep.
And then I have to have replacement insurance on it if it's damaged. But we're going through this deal now where the rates have just continued to go up, and then even if there is a claim, the claim is insufficient to actually replace the building at today's cost.
That's right.
They're insuring the value of the building as it is.
As it is.
Right. But it's going to cost me significantly more to build it. So I'm like, well, why get insurance? Why am I paying these premiums on something I may never use?
Well, but that's the whole game, right? Is like, they don't want you to use it.
Right.
And you're like, no, that's not what we're trying to do.
But even if I use it, it's not getting me sufficient enough money
Coverage.
to replace the building.
That's right.
So I'm, our insurance agent, I brought up yesterday within our conversation about, can we just self-insure these things? I mean, it's a low probability scenario. And at worst case, what?
What'd they say?
Yeah, well,
it's a long conversation.
It's a long conversation, but I just look at it as it's not doing what it was designed to do in the first place. It's just giving me maybe 2/3 of the value that I would actually need.
Yeah.
I still got to come up with money.
And then what about all the equipment? Like, I walked through a hospital the other day.
They'll have their own insurance policies. As a tenant would have their own insurance policies covering those things.
Okay.
I'm just responsible for typically roof and foundation structure.
Okay, so this is more what you're accustomed to, a triple net.
Yeah, triple net. Yeah, you got it. That's the cornerstone of the industry.
All right, so like a lot of people don't know, right? I had to teach a class on, and I was happy to do it.
Yeah.
I was literally driving in Kansas last week, going from Missouri to Nebraska. Well, I guess it was a couple weeks ago now. And a friend of mine called in a private practice, doesn't know how to sign a lease. Didn't know triple net, doesn't understand anything about like, what's a lease? And I was like, okay, Mark, like, hold on. I'm going to turn around. It took me another hour, right? I was on the Columbia side or the Missouri side of Kansas. And I'm like, I'll drive to Kansas City and we'll sit down and do this together. Why is it that these people don't know?
Well, he's just busy in the day-to-day of what they do. They're so in the weeds of their day-to-day. And I mean, let's be honest, a lease it might come up once every 3 to 5 years.
Yeah.
If they're, a solo practitioner. And sometimes even longer. If they're, getting into a new construction, that's a minimum 10-year lease just to be able to amortize in the improvements over that over a defined period that makes sense.
Yeah.
For them.
How'd you get into this deal? Like, how'd you start?
It's all I know it's, for everybody's journey. I always like hearing that as well. How somebody finds their way in a certain,
because when you were born and you were a little kid,
there was
like, oh my God, I want to get into the real estate business of health.
Yeah, no, I was that problem child that was constantly getting into trouble and finding shortcuts to everything.
I believe it.
There were a few suspension halls.
Yeah.
And then you get the paddlings for the principal, and you get another one when you get home because your dad got the phone call.
That was when we had real parents.
Yeah, right. So I grew up in a small town, Oklahoma, and wanted to see the world, wanted to escape. So joined the Navy. And
what did you do in the Navy?
I was actually a firefighter. It was a situation where I wanted to do welding. It was kind of my thinking, and so I got into a welding school, and it was great, But I had specifically come from a family of firefighters out of Oklahoma City, and they tried to get me to follow their steps. And I'm going to do my own thing. I don't want to be a firefighter. That's what everybody else in the family does. And so became a welder. And one of the things we did was we were in charge of repairing the shipboard firefighting systems and pipes, water pipes and sewage pipes and things like that. And so we end up getting firefighting responsibilities, along the way.
Of course it found you.
Yeah. And so I remember being, on our ship. It was a brand new ship that was being commissioned out of Seattle at Lockheed Martin.
Yeah.
And we're going through some testing one day. And during that testing, they were testing pressure on these pipes, and a sewage pipe had burst. And we'd been living on the ship for about 2 months at that point in time. And so a pipe burst, and there's flooding in one of the compartments. And we get called down as the welders to help fix this. And the chief, my chief at the time, Scrivner, get down there and secure that valve. Well, I look down there, and it's about calf deep of toilet paper and other things and floating around. I'm like, okay, I'll go get a Kim suit, and I'll be right back. And he's like, no, get down right now. I'm like, I'm hesitating. This doesn't seem right. And all the while, it just continues to fill up.
Yeah.
And so I kept him hawing around, and finally he's yelling at me, and he's like, if you don't get down there right now, I'm going to write you up and go in front of the captain. So I handed him my pen. I'm like, I'm sorry, I'm not going to the doo-doo.
Yeah.
And he sends me out of there. One of my colleagues has to go down in the hole, and he's just yelling the whole time, damn you, Scrivner.
So he was pissed.
So the next day I have to appear in front of the captain, and captain's kind of got this smirk on his face at times, like, so Scrivner, what's this I hear about you not wanting to go in the doo-doo? I'm like, I'm sorry, sir. It just really seemed like a bad idea. There's diseases in there. And he goes, well, I got some good news for you. I'm not gonna punish you.
Yeah.
But we're gonna split the rating up. So we're gonna have hull technicians who are welders and damage control men, and they're gonna be our firefighters. And I'm like, I'm a firefighter, sir. I come from a long family of firefighters. so that was my career.
That's awesome.
I ended up enjoying it. I had a great time over 4 years, and he gave me money for college. And so I ended up doing some college in California, San Diego while I was there, and then finished up in Oklahoma in Edmond, and happened to be working out at the gym. I was a manager at this gym there while I was going to school.
You were a manager at a gym?
I was a manager at a gym, while I was going to school. A guy there owned he owned a company that was a device rep, hip and knee replacements, and he took a liking to me, and he one day offers me a job to come to work for him and go into surgery, and you're advising on installations of these things. And of course, I've got buddies that I graduated college, that were working for pharma companies and stuff, and they're like, dang it, that's the kind of job we're trying to get to.
Yeah, we're trying to get them.
Right. And then so I worked for them for 2.5 years.
How'd you like it? Total joint business. That's a different deal.
It was a great time. I mean, orthos are a lot of fun.
They're the best.
It's just, they're sports guys. I was a sports guy, so it was always great, chemistry.
Yeah. What was it like the first time in the OR? The first time you see them taking off a patella?
It's a funny thing because you think, but it's really because of the way they isolate it with aprons and things. You really become detached from it to a degree. And so there's not the gross out factor that you might.
Yeah, it's not like the whole human body's laying there naked in front of you.
Right.
That's not happening.
And so you're really just kind of focused in on a small area. And
what device did you have?
So I had a hip called the SROM hip.
Okay.
So it was a modular hip system that allowed for adjustments in length and size of femur and the pelvic cup. All these things had different size pieces that they could put in. And so I did that. I had a knee replacement device with some spinal fusions, great toe implant.
Like we've talked a bunch, and I didn't. I feel like I've missed this part of our conversation.
Well, this was the part that I really kind of learned, the practice side of medicine and understanding, the things that were going on for the doctors, and how decisions were made in hospitals, and that was really kind of one of the frustrations that led me to leave that industry as well, because this goes back to the mid-90s. Columbia HCA was big at the time, and aggregating everything together, and really became more involved in decisions regarding purchasing.
Yeah.
And so if you didn't meet their purchasing guidelines, that doctor wasn't able to use your implant. And so it made no difference whether you had a relationship or not. They had preferred providers that they wanted to use that as the first line of defense and or offense. And then our hip was kind of if it's a reconstruction, then yes, you can use it. But we weren't approved and kicked out of a lot, and it just became less relationship driven and more purchasing agent,
more PA
bureaucracy.
And then I don't think people understand the hours. So like in the Navy, I was in the Marine Corps, obviously.
Yeah.
I mean, you just work. Yeah. There are days you don't work very much, but there's a lot of days you just work 24/7. Yeah. And then this is how it is in the OR. Yeah. Like when you're a device rep, it starts early, finishes late.
You're up 4 a.m. a lot of times at the hospital by 5 to have your instruments sterilized, and hopefully got them over there ahead of time, but just to prep and look at the x-rays, make sure you understand what's going to go on. And then you're there to provide support to the
physicians don't like doing cases without their reps.
Yeah, well, it's
especially then in the 90s.
Savos Health is today's sponsor, bringing you the largest marketplace of affordable cash prices for medical care such as imaging, labs, and procedures. Savos Connect makes it easy for patients and physicians to offer bundled pricing, simple scheduling, and immediate cash payment. It's perfect for anyone looking to cut out traditional networks and pay directly. Visit Savos Health's website at savos.com and discover how cash pay can transform your healthcare experience.
The idea is that we've seen a lot of cases that they may not have seen. So in situations, what do? It's just being able to provide that guidance, and we've got instrumentation that in this situation we're going to use this, and here's how that works.
So how does it work? You went from, hey, I'm going to advise some docs on implants to this is what a capillary is. Yeah. How's that work?
That's where it's interesting.
I know, I love it.
Yeah. So having getting frustrated with the oversight from purchasing agents.
Yeah.
I just became disenfranchised with the industry, and I'd always had an interest in real estate, and I was living in Wichita, Kansas at the time, and I wanted to get into real estate and sell commercial properties.
Yeah.
And so if I was going to go somewhere where they had a lot of properties, Dallas was the place. And
what a great market.
Relocated to Dallas and had a great time there. I focused on industrial.
Oh, you did?
I did. Interesting. I love business.
Yeah.
And so I like, real estate is just the infrastructure that houses a business. And so I want to know what's going on inside the infrastructure. How do they make money? What widgets are they producing? And then who do they sell to? And so I just would go into these deep dives of really kind of understanding things. And it allowed me then to make connections with manufacturer over here was, I know a distributor over here. They worked in the same industry. And do you guys know each other? No.
Yeah.
Gosh, why don't we introduce each other? So you just start connecting dots and trying to, find different ways to leverage what and help people make money, and you make money along the way.
Yeah.
I've never had anybody get upset about me helping them make money. I don't know.
How much commission are you making on this deal?
Yeah. And so I did that until 2006. And when I moved to Tulsa, I got introduced to what was then Stan Johnson Company.
Yeah.
And it was really pioneers of the net lease industry. Stan was one office in Tulsa, Oklahoma, and worked all over the country, working with developers who developed on behalf of Walmart, Walgreens, CVS, all your big national retailers who had kind of figured out that in order to expand their footprint, they couldn't have capital tied up in real estate. It's a burden on their balance sheet that they could get away from if they just had a lease.
Yeah.
And so that allowed for this rapid expansion we've seen over the last 20 years of national retailers. And when I got introduced to the company, I immediately like, okay, healthcare has not followed suit in that way, but I recognized that the same principles were true. We've had urban sprawl, which means that all of those people are having to travel back downtown to the hospital, where you got this congested mess and maze of offices as they try to find where they're supposed to go. And so really kind of at that point recognized that there was going to need to be an outpatient strategy for delivering healthcare to where the rooftops were, more of a retail model. And hospitals couldn't tie up their capital
to do that.
Do that.
Yeah.
And so that was really, I kind of saw the culmination of my careers at that point. And I laid out a strategy to Stan of focusing in on the healthcare sector. And he says, you'll never make it just doing one thing. You gotta sell a lot of net lease different products. And That's usually what inspires me to watch me,
Yeah.
And so I really started on the medical practice group for the company. I created that along with my partner, Jeff Matulis, and we began to just kind of help those developers who were being called to, or had relationships with healthcare systems or doctors, and helped coach them on how to structure a deal that would have appeal in the marketplace.
So how did you do that? Like, did you literally, I mean, like, so no one,
But
and then you're like, hey, we got to meet some people.
what?
Yeah. What was that like?
Well, I mean, you have to keep in mind at the time, this is almost 20 years ago, Dutch.
Yeah, I know.
At the time,
I like to forget the bad times.
yeah, well,
I remember those days with Chuck. Like we were talking about this morning, like cold calling, and I was like, I hate, like it was terrible, but I did it. It was terrible.
but it's still to this day, it's the same thing. But no, it was at the time, there wasn't even a medical office sector. I mean,
No, there's nothing.
there was office, industrial, and retail, real estate, and I would comb through the office stuff to find healthcare real estate transactions. Who was the buyer? Who was the seller? And then I'd look. Obviously, at the time there were really, I think maybe there were 7 publicly traded REITs that did healthcare.
Yeah.
Mostly it was comprised of just regional funds or families, and any of the others. But I've always found the most effective way to learn something is to just ask and get somebody to take you under the wing. I don't know what you know.
Yeah.
And so I'd call up an owner. I'm like, how did you get started with this? What was, I didn't need to sell anything right now. And
we'll get to that.
I want to understand how it works. What are your goals? How do you get there? I mean, and so then I would share data. I've always been a big data guy. And I would, I'd take all those properties that I'd found in that office, sheet of sales activity, and I'd break them down, not only by just the medical price per square foot, but what kind of use was it? Are we talking about outpatient medical or these ambulatory surgery centers? Was it an acute care, post-acute? And all of that data was relevant to understanding the price per foot or the price per bed that merited it based upon revenues that were generated, within that sector. And that's really been my secret sauce to kind of helping the folks that we work with, be it developers, physician practice owners who've self-developed their own building, or hospital systems.
Well, you were an early guy in PHA. How'd you get involved with that?
Well, again, back to wanting to know that little kid in me that likes to discover and, figure out what happens when you do this, And
well, I thought I was giving you secrets this summer. You're like, no, bro, I was involved with this when you were in diapers.
No. Yeah, I thought that was funny though. No, I was glad that you got me reintroduced to it because we get so busy in the day to day of what we do, and you forget things that were important to getting in there in the first place.
Yeah,
and PHA was an organization that really helped me kind of understand the physician perspective, the challenges, and the headwinds that they were facing. There's value.
Yeah. So, like, I'm all in on this conversation. I've had it with you a lot.
You're a little fashioned about it.
Well, yeah, a little. When we 96, 97, when you were doing it, I got in the surgery center side 97, 98. That was the first time. I'd never heard the word surgery center before. Didn't know what ambulatory. Started learning. Back then, it was really new. Today, building ASC is not new, except if you're in a certificate of need state where they don't let you. What does it look like? Like, what's the next 3 or 4 years? I don't want you to give away any secrets because I want you to make a lot of money. But like, what does it look like? Where are we going? Is it still ASCs? Like, are there enough?
Well, I think the short answer is about 6,500 ASCs in the country at this point in time.
Yeah.
But I would say,
I love that you know that, by the way.
Yeah, well,
I mean, it's like 64, 68, somewhere in there. I don't know.
The HOPD model has been, big because health systems have had such a constraint on limiting what physicians could do.
Yeah.
But I think, that has been, we've seen this go back and forth, this pendulum of, back in the early 90s, we had consolidation of healthcare practices and hospitals. And then it swung back the direction of independence. And then it swung back towards the consolidations, which is where we are. And I'm seeing signs that it's swinging back the other way yet again. The mandates of EMR, electronic medical records, and the cost associated with that have made it challenging for practices. But, there are tons of physicians who, came out of med school in the early 30s and had, were really thrilled about the idea of just taking a salary, minimizing responsibilities and obligations, and make a nice salary, pay off student loans, spend time with the kids. But now that they're getting into their 40s, it's like, well, I expected to do better in my life than what this is providing for me. And so they're looking for opportunities outside of the employed model. And we're seeing now signs for the first time that, hospital systems are kind of having to relax their policies on not being able to work outside of the system.
Really? So like the moonlighting process?
The moonlighting, allowing them to participate in other ventures. One, it creates future opportunities for the hospital system themselves because they could then buy in. That's revenue that they can buy at some future point. But the other thing is that it's hard enough to recruit physicians as it is, especially in certain markets. And so being a little more flexible in your willingness to allow those types of things gives you an advantage of keeping that physician where you may lose them otherwise. Because these guys, they're motivated to try to, create opportunities, and they have the ability to do so. So, taking an investment interest in an ambulatory surgery center offers a great way.
Super smart.
Yeah.
Yeah, and you can generate a lot of, you can make a little money.
Yeah.
If you do it right. What are like, I see mistakes all the time. What are the mistakes these guys make in ownership of an ASC?
Well, there's a lot of different ways they structure them. There's there's obviously several ways of structure. Just either taking all the risk yourself as a newly formed ASC group, your de novo venture with no value, no enterprise value.
Yeah.
But within a very short period of time, within 12 months, you've created an enterprise value that has value in and of itself. Yeah. And then there are advantages to bringing on a joint venture partner, be it that a third-party ASC operator or the hospital, or something like that.
Yeah.
And there are advantages that can be gained there. I like having an ASC operator involved. It denotes that there's experience at the helm.
Sure.
It's
you're not learning for the first time.
Right.
Yeah.
And so I think a lot of times if I'm saying there's mistakes, it's overlooking the value of bringing in an operator at an earlier stage, but it's a tough thing. We're dealing with, well-educated physicians who are competent in what to do. As a physician buddy of mine says, oh gosh, I'm trying to think of his saying. It's
he is pretty confident.
He's pretty confident.
He doesn't lack confidence.
I don't know. It's like occasionally, never wrong. It's just his thing is like never wrong. But my point in that is that when you get doctors who have their own confidence, lends them to believe that they're fully capable of managing, seeing patients, and do everything on their own. That's where it can be detrimental.
It's a tough bit.
It's tough.
One of the fascinating things I found is I had a great conversation with a guy named Mark Valentine.
Yeah.
Mark runs the physician-owned heart hospital that did a partnership with Baylor Scott and White.
Okay.
People, a lot of independent friends of mine will go shriek, when they hear a health system. But he said something I thought was interesting. I'd love your take. He said, it's all about the operating agreements. So like when I look at deals, USPI, SCA, surgery partners, the deals where they're managing a center, and when deals go wrong, I go back to the operating agreement. And I go, well, hey, doc, why'd you sign this?
Right.
What is it about docs where they don't feel like they have the power to look at those agreements and say, I don't want that. I want this. And if they have it this way, then guess what? They can have a flourishing center. Because I do want an expert in there.
Yeah.
And the docs I know, as much as I love them, as much as I've been around for 30 years, I don't want them to run my ASC. Not with no experience.
Well, I would agree. Yeah. I think there's, depending on the operators, there's probably certainly are situations where an operator this is our agreement. That's it. Take it or leave it. And a lot of times by the time they get to that point, a group may be so invested with time and energy that they probably go ahead and move forward with it.
Yeah.
I think that's one of the things that we are able to offer is just perspective of having seen a broad spectrum of deals. We get to weigh in early on as to, I've seen this here, this may be considered, this could affect the value here because the operating agreement also affects the real estate.
That's right.
You've got two investments there. You've got a business that you created, but you've also created an investment of real estate. And, you could have a great real estate lease that generates value, but if you've got an operating agreement that has holes in it that the tenant or the operations could up and relocate next week with no penalty, well, you just destroyed all the value you created in the real estate. And so we have to balance those and looking at, well, what are we bringing to the table? What are we getting from this operator? Is this just an independent one-off LLC and they've, limited all liabilities? Or operating agreement has no teeth in it that keeps the positions on board. Mm-hmm. And so I think that might be one of the things where they're trying to put teeth in there that, make sure the physicians stay in.
Yep.
So
what are the benefits to having a health system partner?
You're able to use their provider number to get a higher reimbursement rate. Those are the things.
They're always a little higher.
They're a little higher. That's right. You're also getting an enhancement of credit because of that affiliation. It enhances the perceived credit of the tenant in the real estate.
Does that generate a higher valuation on the property?
It generates a higher valuation.
But on both, right? The business and the valuation.
Correct.
And the real estate.
And it's interesting. It's perceived as being from the business side, it's perceived as being a feeder source that will keep the business viable. And on the real estate side, it's just a credit that they'll not struggle to pay the rent at the end of the day. But most ASCs, I mean, gosh, we used to see rent coverage ratios of EBITDA to rent, it may be 7, 8 times rent. So they're generating more than enough revenue. Rent's not really a problem.
Rent's not a problem for you.
Yeah. This was one of the early conversations I had, with Stan when I went down this path, because so much of our net lease industry is about credit. What's the credit of the tenant? And in an ASC, there really isn't much of a balance sheet. Most of it's passed through. Bonuses, and so you're not maintaining a balance sheet. And so you look at that and like, well, there's no credit. And so I challenge the perception of credit, and that we can look to a Walgreens, which is in AA rated credit, but on a unit level performance, they're performing at 1.2 times rent coverage. So EBITDA to rent 1.2 to 1.25. So any little hiccup in their business could destroy that unit level's ability to pay its rent. If I'm getting 7 times rent coverage, are we really concerned about a default on the lease? And
no,
right,
we're not concerned.
Right, that's not the concern. So, and now though it's been eroded just because of the increasing cost of construction. So it now costs in excess of $475 a foot to build an ambulatory surgery center. So if you're looking at a 9% return on that, you're going to be in the high $30 a square foot on rents, and that's eroded away that coverage. But it's valuable infrastructure, and I always kind of like to point out that it's become cost prohibitive to build facilities. So all of that available infrastructure out there is very valuable. Because healthcare services are still going to be delivered. It's like owning the train tracks. The dirt that's 10 feet left or right of it isn't worth crap, but those tracks, goods and services are going to get delivered down those tracks, and you're going to be able to charge for it. So healthcare real estate's the same way. It's a special finish out, for special services.
I've never thought about it that way. That's fantastic. It's unit economics, makes total sense.
So we're nationally, the occupancy rate of medical office is in the low 90%. Here in Tulsa, we're at 95% occupancy.
But like you and I can literally go build a building tomorrow. Someone's going to fill it out.
Well, that's the challenge. The reason why, and so we've seen major escalation in rental rates. I think it escalated. It was about 1.4%, last year. So from it continues to escalate. There's no new construction planned, so that just means that the rates will continue to escalate. But to go and build something right now, you'd have to get $35 a foot in rent, and that's a tall order when the market average is $23.40 a foot.
Oh, jeez.
Yeah.
You're not making your money back tomorrow.
Well, you're $10 above market, and that's where it gets tough. So you've got to have a very motivated group that's, they need to be there. They have to have space. There's nothing else available. This is what it is.
On the broader market, what's happening in in medical properties, from health systems to down to independents? What are we seeing? Because you are highly data driven.
Yeah. These demand drivers that I'm talking about, we know with the aging population, the demand for healthcare services is only increasing. Once somebody gets over the age of like 65, they go from visiting the doctor 1 to 2 times a year to 7 times on average. So huge demand, as we're putting 10,000 people a day into the age group. So all that is demand. Every operator out there is struggling to find physicians. They're in huge demand. Every provider at every level is in demand. So that's a tough challenge, and they're trying to find ways to offset that. But when it comes to the real estate side, it's demand for those facilities that have existing infrastructure that can be utilized. Building new is it's challenging from a cost perspective, from a time perspective. You're at a minimum 24 months from the time that you agree to a deal, go through architectural, site selection, all of those things, and then construction. It's 24 months from now, and that's 24 months that you could have been generating revenue if you'd have found a facility that had the things that you needed. They could be redeveloped in a 3-month period to accommodate you. So that's a lot of what we've been working on, is just helping find properties that are right for this, where there's markets, where there's an opportunity because of demand drivers. A lot of what we're doing now is analyzing markets for what do we know about specialty demand? Can we find gaps, where we're seeing concentrations of certain types of cases that require specialty, and then helping either systems or practice groups that maybe specialize in that sector to, hey, there's an opportunity for you guys here. What do you think about having a satellite location and putting somebody down here once a week or something like that? We can look at, so by being able to access payer data, I can see where CMS is collecting data as well as insurance, private pay. And we're looking at drivers of specific areas of where we know there's going to be opportunity.
Any interesting ones?
We've got quite a few.
Yeah.
I've got a few locally that we're working on.
Oh, good.
So
one that comes to mind for sure is as we see more of a move to outpatient. I met with a bunch of cardiologists, and I did some talk a year ago or something to one of the cardiology associations in Florida, and all of a sudden I'm seeing a move to outpatient, which I've never seen in that specialty.
Right.
Do you know what's I don't even know what's causing it. I don't know what the actual macro driver is.
Yeah.
But I'm seeing it. Like, doctors are calling and saying, Dutch, I want to be in an ASC. I don't know what it is. I don't know how it works.
Right.
What do I do? I'm a doc in Kissimmee, Florida, Orlando, Florida.
Right.
But I want to do this. What do I need? What equipment do I need? How do I make it work? What's reimbursed? Like, all the questions.
Right.
Is that specialty alone, or are there more? Like,
well, that specialty in particular has, in recent years, I want to say it's maybe 4 years ago, or 5, somewhere in there, CMS came out with guidelines that allowed for certain procedures, stents. This is the primary thing, of being able to do those in an outpatient setting.
Chuck's had like 9 of those.
Okay. So that's, but those were always done. Cardiologists always had to be in the hospital.
Yeah.
Most of their procedures always involved them having.
Yeah, and if you talk to them, they go, no, we don't do that stuff. We're in the hospital.
Right.
I'm like, look.
Well, that changed.
And
when that changed, so now they're, this model of a ASC and OBL, office-based lab, allowed them the opportunity for the first time to move outside of the hospital and have an ownership in something, a business that they could generate more money for themselves than being, on part of the health system and part of that system. So we've seen a lot of that. I think, that group in particular has been very enthusiastic. As a specialty.
You think we're ever going to see a change on this moratorium? And if we do see a change on the moratorium of physician or hospital, do you think we'd see a significant increase in supply, or maybe just an expansion? Because they've kind of been, hey, you can only do X, and now 15 years later, we're telling me maybe you can do Y too.
Yeah. I think it's good. Boy, there's pros and cons to it.
Yeah.
I know we've talked about this, and there are.
I just want you to get more customers.
Do I think we'll see an end to the moratorium? Yes, with constraints. I think there will be scrutiny over, east of the Mississippi, we see, certificate of need states really taking a role in, determining whether or not there should be another hospital. Do we need more beds kind of thing? Or is this, as hospitals complained for years, it's just the doctors taking the cream off the top and leaving us with all the Medicare. And so I think there'll be some oversight as to what that looks like and where there's needs. But I think there's plenty of facilities around the country currently that are vacated acute care facilities that have gone dark that, could be utilized by physicians who, if given the opportunity, could create a model that serves consumers. I mean, at the end of the day, they're not patients, they're consumers. They're consumers of healthcare services, and they should have a choice as to what that service looks like.
Yeah.
And I think physicians are tuned into that. If we're delivering something they want outside of what the health system is offering, why shouldn't we be able to?
Do you think physicians are more likely to go in places, geographical locations that corporations may not want to go?
Yes.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I think and what's interesting about that is when you think about corporations, you typically would expect there to be better economies of scale, that they should be able to absorb that better. But it's not the focus of their attention. And so you look at all the management contracts of health systems that have gone out and managed rural hospitals, and all they're doing is just sending everything back to the mothership.
Yeah, we see that here.
Right. And then the hospital somehow is not making any money.
Yeah.
So I think if physicians were allowed to have that type of facility, they create, marketing and staffing procedures that cater to a certain person that, look, I like this environment.
Yeah.
And they're getting better treatment than they would in a corporate environment where everybody's got 1,000 other things that they're focused on.
How do you think, like, this is really important. I don't think I ever really paid attention to the regulatory framework. And it's only been in the last 5 years that I've gotten involved, really, like understanding CMS reimbursement. What are we telling, or how does regulatory risk kind of factor into the things you do? Like, we did a poll recently where we were like, hey, do you know what certificate of need is? A lot of physicians know what it is. The general public has little to no understanding of it. And then lawmakers at the national and state levels,
Right.
we had less than 4% out of some 3,500 participants in our survey that knew what certificate of need was. And you said it's mostly east of the Mississippi. That's 100% true. What kind of effect does something like certificate of need have? And is it like, how does it weigh into what I'm going to do or what I'm going to invest in property?
Well, I think as an investor, when you're acquiring an asset in a certificate of need state, you know that you've got some protections against competition. So your facility, in theory, should be in demand.
That's right.
So there are benefits to that.
From my perspective as an investor, there's 100% benefit.
Right. Some of the regulatory things that we get concerned about are the annual cuts that CMS makes. When you look at a facility type like inpatient rehab, which is, you've got really three places. And when a person is being discharged out of an acute care hospital, they need to continue therapy services. They're going to go to a skilled nursing facility, long-term acute care, or inpatient rehab facility. The average length of stay is for an inpatient rehab is about 20, 21 days. So they're going through occupational therapy and a number of things. Their importance to the care model, because what can't happen is that patient have complications from their original admission into the acute care, and they have to go back to the acute care. That impacts the reimbursement that they would have got for that original. They're
Right.
They're penalized. But of the three modalities, inpatient rehab continues to have the better outcomes, higher statistical outcomes. It's gained favor with CMS. So they've increased the criteria that would permit someone to be discharged into that environment versus an LTAC versus a SNF. So we've seen the growth of this model across the country. Just, you've got Encompass, which is the largest, but you've seen a lot of regional growth of different companies. Post-acute medical, Select Medical, Kindred, and Novus is another. But to go and build these facilities, you're getting up there. It's
a lot of money.
$850 to almost $1,000 a square foot to build them. So your cost is, in that $65 a square foot in rent, and with escalations because you got to keep pace with inflation. So the concern for investors as they look at that model is, all right, I'm buying an asset that's got a 20-year lease. My rents are increasing every year. That's great. But I'm looking at the reimbursement model. The revenues are coming from the federal government and CMS, which is decreasing that reimbursement every year for the services they provide. At what point do those two lines cross out in the future and they can't cover? Because if it's a 50-bed facility and you've got them filled all the time, there's a finite amount of revenue you can generate.
That's right.
And so those are the kind of the concerns that investors have to think about in evaluating that. I would ask you, kind of thinking down the road in that scenario, how does the government allow these facilities to not be profitable and expect them to stay in business?
They can't,
Right.
right? And CMS knows it.
Right.
Yeah. But like every other large bureaucracy, without sounding too overly political, they only move when they must, right? And so it will be those facilities, those facility owners, facility investors that will go and visit Washington and will say, listen, here's the truth, and this is what's going to happen in the next 3 years if you don't figure this out. And it's going to be data driven. And then they'll go, oh, okay, we ought to change that.
Right.
I don't see much change. I mean, as you know, I've been involved with them for a long time. I don't see any change until it's imperative. Like, it's like, if we don't fix this tomorrow, we'll all be in trouble.
Right.
Yeah. So I always think it's interesting because the amount of data that you provide is so granular. And I mean, you know this, I've been dealing in medical real estate since 1997. And you're one of the few guys around the country that does that. I mean, you have to think about all the risks. Then you got to assign some probability to those risks. And then you have to say, okay, but now how do we reevaluate them? Because they could change, like you said. CMS came out with a final ruling yesterday, right? Reducing pro fees 2.5%. And then it was some 5,000-page deal, right? Like, I got to sift through it sometime over the next, maybe over the holidays, and start figuring out what's going on. But I like the way that you kind of just take all the risks, assign a probability, and say, well, hey, Mr. Investor, here's a total picture. What do health systems look like going in the future? Does this vertical integration consolidation help them? Like, are they going to own all the facilities we've just talked about? Or there's ASCs will be gone? No.
I think that staying within their lane
Yeah.
is critical to their business. And I think there's been numerous evidence of when they've deviated from that, where those have failed.
Yeah.
I mean, even the idea of having it for the longest time, we've had inpatient rehab or LTAC beds inside, wing of the hospitals, but it's a deviation.
It doesn't work.
It's not the core. It's not working, and they're getting far better outcomes when they go to a specialist who's focused in on that business and maximizing the revenues that they can generate from the payers that are providing services, providing the payment to those services. So I think for hospitals to deviate from that is a distraction from what is their business.
I always think about, like, if I could put myself in their shoes, what would I be thinking about now? What should private practices be thinking about now in terms of real estate? So they're thinking about ASCs. You and I've had some conversations with doc groups that want to start REITs.
Right.
Where's this going?
I think for any practice group, it's footprint is kind of the big thing I think about first and foremost. Your business is an investment, and the goal of any business or investment is buy low, sell high.
That's right.
There's an exit at some point, and you're trying to position yourself for that exit. Footprint is one of the best ways to increase the EBITDA multiple that your business would be valued at. So I would look at identifying, markets of opportunity where we can expand our brand into those markets, so that, if we're looked at by an MSO that wants to come in and acquire us, we're going to look like the dominant player. I think consolidation is another one. To maintain independence, coming together. We've got a fairly good urology group here that's dominated the market for 20 years. Because they consolidated, came together, and it gives them more bargaining power. They just work far more effectively with insurers as well as the health systems, and they get to dictate the day-to-day of their practice.
That's right.
So they're controlling their own destiny. So I think those are the things that I look to physician groups to try to do if they want to maintain their independence from a health system.
Yep.
Which in many cases those health systems are backed by private equity out of New York, and private equity has a return that they're looking to see, and it's just see more patients, and that's frustrating.
The PE thing's always strange for me because I try to think first principles. I'm not the smartest guy in the world, but you've heard a lot of angst, hatred about PE. But if you consider the facts, PE's only around because CMS assigns a reimbursement to smaller private practices and says, hey, you can do the same procedure, but the health system is going to get a lot more, right? And they'll likely get a facility fee. What is it about PE that's actually good? I like to be a little controversial, as you know. I do think there are good aspects of PE.
Yeah.
What do you like about PE-backed practices?
PE provides an excellent opportunity to grow. It's a capital source with plans and experience that can help a practice grow.
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, they're good operators.
Right. I mean,
Maybe too good.
They've brought in ideas from that they've collected on the industry and from other providers. So they're bringing the best of what's available out there.
Yeah.
And then money on top of that to fund and fuel the growth. But it's money raised for the purpose of achieving a return. So there are return expectations on that, and there are hoops that must be jumped through. So you're signing up for obligations.
That's right.
It's not money without obligations. There are things expected. And sometimes that's where, parties get crosswise. But private equity is in real estate as well. I mean, we see private equity coming into the healthcare real estate side of things. You've got REITs that have had investments in hospital systems. They've made loans on real estate, and essentially it's a sale leaseback, but we look at it like a loan.
It's a loan. Yeah.
But they made loans that the operations weren't capable of sustaining. And how much of that money was put back into the business to help grow the business? How much of it was, buying new yachts? So those are the kind of questions where I think scrutiny comes into play as to, is this prudent, and is this looking out for the healthcare consumer's best interests?
I'm thinking about who makes the best capital partner. So in all the long time work you've done, who do you like best? And is it dependent on the audience that you're talking about, or is it not who's listening here, but really like if it's an independent practice, who do you like? If it's a health system, it might be different.
Right.
Like who have you enjoyed working with that kind of says, these people are on the same page?
It's interesting because I think it is situation.
Yeah, for sure.
Everybody's got different needs, different motivations of the principles, different stages of life. So you're constantly evaluating those kinds of things. I think it's probably the benefit of having done this for 20 years is that, once I hear what somebody's objectives are or group's, intentions are, I've usually got a pretty good idea of whom I think may be a good strategic partner for them. And then it's a matter of do the personalities align, and working with them. Sometimes the best partner is a health system, where there's a commitment to the community and, it resonates in everything that they do.
Yeah.
And so that becomes really kind of more of the alignment than, say, somebody coming in to, pay an exorbitant amount of money. Best price is not always, or the highest price is not always the most motivating thing. I think we're seeing that play itself out. It's interesting that more and more, there's almost a resentment to private equity because of the damage that's been caused.
Yeah.
And so there's kind of this recognition that perhaps we've gone through this period of historically high prices being paid for practices and for the real estate that those practices and hospitals occupy because of the low interest rates. And so most of the calls I was making, it's like, hey, I can get you this much money for your property. I mean, we'll take that. And So it was an easy sale. That was the motivating factor. But what ends up happening is you've got, key principals that were, the original developers and owners of the real estate. They've still got practice partners that are obligating themselves to this lease, and the relationship is souring. And it's the deal that they struck wasn't necessarily in the best interest of the practice overall. And so I think folks are starting to kind of recognize that, all right, price isn't everything. Let's look at other aspects of the arrangement between landlord and tenant, or in a private equity scenario, in terms of an M&A and what that might look like, and making sure that they've got some controls.
This episode is brought to you by the MJ Companies, experts in comprehensive risk management and consulting for private practices and physician-owned hospitals. MJ's holistic approach begins with the in-depth risk assessments to understand your practice, their unique challenges, and the opportunities. Their solutions span everything from employee benefits with cost-saving captive models to robust property and casualty coverages, all aimed at securing your practice. And they don't stop at risk mitigation. They proactively design strategies for growth, including building networks that boost your new patient volume and create sustainable revenue sources such as PPM fees, capitated payment options, and others. MJ ensures that your practice is both protected and primed for success. Discover their full range of solutions at themjcompanies.com.
How do you help? I mean, you see it just as much as I do. And I was in a conflict last week where you've got people retiring, private practice docs, and then you've got existing partners and new partners trying to get in.
Yeah.
Why have historically, like, I don't know how I get roped into these deals. Why haven't they learned better frameworks? Like, I see some really good ones where I go, okay, why did you set this place up to really, at the end of the day, what you just said is you become enemies.
Yeah.
Because now I'm trying to retire.
Right.
I want my return, but you want to buy, and the way we've set it up, this creates an adversarial relationship.
Yeah.
How do you help with that?
Well, I think a lot of it is, and again, this is a lot of what you die is that transition plans. And, a lot of it's personality driven. It depends on the personalities of the individuals involved. And I try to come in and play, matchmaker and occasionally the velvet hammer when necessary. But, it's kind of an understanding that there is value creation by the original founders who took the debt risk, who put themselves at risk financially to build this facility, similar to what a developer would do.
Sure.
And there's value in that.
100%.
But there's also value in the commitment that these younger partners are making to a 15 or 20-year lease that's creating value, beyond.
That's right.
And so it's a combination of those values that are there. So it's, a lot of times it's understanding that, well, perhaps because of this much value that they're creating, it's their bonus on the sale of a percentage of that value.
Yeah.
So they're contributing to it. But what I always try to remind the physicians, especially the younger ones that are kind of in their 30s and don't have the financial resources to buy in, it's like, look, this thing is going to come to the end of its lease term when you're at the peak of your career, and they're going to need to either get you to renew or sell the building. It's at that point that you buy it, you put some money into it, and we turn that around and structure the whole thing, and you're going to get a big payday. So there is that coming for them. The other thing we do is we'll bring in a joint venture partner that will buy the asset and then allow those younger physicians who are wanting those, they'll buy into that new special purpose entity, or in many cases, get shares in a fund in which they'll have ownership in not only this facility, but a portfolio.
I love that.
Of medical facilities. So it spreads the risk out.
Yes.
It reduces the amount that they're getting into, but they're feeling like owners.
Yeah. No, I like that. I want to make it, I don't want to use the word equitable, but I want to make it easier. I saw a model the other day, I mean, it's probably months ago, where essentially you had to sell back to the original partnership.
Yeah.
The original partnership then redistributes ownership, and they make all the units at different prices so everyone can buy in. So you get this high number, but it's broken up. So anybody in the practice can then buy again. Of course, it's capped at a certain number. Like you can't own over X as a single person. But all the young guys who say, well, okay, I can't write a $100,000 check, but I can write you one for 25, they're in too. So I like this units thing that you've discussed. I just want to make it easy for them to have something.
Yes.
Right? The idea that like, I got to write a check. I saw this last year for $600,000. Well, like, okay, man, that's like, they can't do that. You got a $200,000 debt burden.
Right.
Then they got a house. Then they got kids. They have spouses. Like they just, and the bank's not giving them the money.
Right. Well, that's kind
Can't do it.
that's been the challenge for a lot of these younger physicians who wanted to buy in because, yeah, well, you built it for, call it $1 million, but now it's worth, $10 million.
Yeah.
Well, I'm not going to sell it to you. They want to buy in at the
Original
basis.
Yeah.
No, there's value that's been created there.
Yeah.
So it's some compromise. A lot of times it's finding that even ground of what's a fair and equitable distribution of it. That.
Let's talk about your business specifically.
Yeah.
Where is it going? And I mean, like you're one of the original kind of the OGs in, I say that to you because it's really true. You were thinking about these things before anyone else.
Yeah.
And I like saying that now with confidence at nearly 50 because I'm like, no, I've been around for a long time. I know who was playing in these spots. I was one. What do you say to the young people? Like we talk about culture a lot. We talk about management a lot. We talk about building teams.
Yeah.
What do you say to the young people that are now where we were then, who are like, hey, I love real estate. I love analysis. I love data. And I'm a people pleaser. And I'm also a good athlete. I'm also get along well. What do we say to those people and how do we get them ready?
Yeah.
Because this is a tough world we live in. And most of the ones, that we've discussed, that hasn't turned out well.
Right. No, it's interesting because we've essentially been riding a wave for the better part of 15 years.
Yeah.
Now. Unfortunately, I've been in real estate long enough at this point. This is my third, downturn in the market and in terms of recessions, and each one has been different for different reasons. And but I've always believed that there's opportunity in every market. This wave that we've been riding for the last 15 years was a wave that was really prompted by low interest rates, and it just escalated into this being able to pay higher pricing for deals, and it was a good time to be a seller.
Yeah.
Right? I think the biggest change I'm trying to impart upon the people that are in my space now is quit trying to chase the puck in terms of where it's skate to where it's going to be.
Mm-hmm.
Because there are times to buy and own real estate if you're a practice group thinking about how to create opportunities. And I think that's the market that we're in now. So I'm trying to get them to think beyond just cap rates, finding somebody who's motivated to sell at what, the market will bear today. That's a lot of phone calls to find somebody who's, going through death, divorce, or taxes that, has to sell and they're under an obligation to sell at the market. So why not create value in other ways? Why not work with practice groups that you can help them, like I said, expand their footprint and be strategic about it? So that's where I'm trying to utilize data that helps a practice group grow for the future and take advantage of the opportunities that we are in right now of either, we've got an office market out there that's got a lot of vacancy. Can we find opportunities where we can redevelop an asset that would serve your practices, growth needs, or, attack a different market that you're not in now? And that's creating value for folks. And at some future point in time, if the market changes, interest rates come down, then there's a motivation to capitalize on that investment that you've made. But, we're advising on multiple fronts, be it development, site selection, joint venture structures, and even M&A. I mean, if we've developed a lot of relationships with urgent care operators around the country. We know who's backing them, what markets that they're looking at. Are there acquisition opportunities of other operators we know that are nearing retirement and they're thinking about what that exit looks like? So I like to just bring people together.
I know you're good at it too.
It's taking what you know and
Making it a little better.
I'm just bringing the guesses in. So
I love young people. How do they get involved in this business? And what are the hardships? Because We spend a lot of time talking about that.
Well, I think the hardships of the last 2 years have just been the challenge of getting transactions done. The interest rates and higher construction costs have just made it very problematic for a deal to pencil out from a operational liability.
Yeah.
The cost of occupancy is a challenge. So all of that lends itself to much longer runway of getting a deal done. I think it's having that, it is kind of a commissions only.
Yeah, it's a commission deal, man.
You eat what you kill.
Right.
But we've got programs that we like young talent that comes to us with a financial background, understands underwriting and in real estate in particular. Those are people that we look for, and we'll put them on a 2-year salary program and training where they're getting analytical opportunities to evaluate deals with us, and then transition over time as their experience increases. So becoming brokers themselves.
How hard is it?
We always say it's it's a business. It's 25% science or finance and 75% art. I don't think it's that hard from an art standpoint. I think it's someone coming with an inquisitive mind who wants to understand the industry that they're in. I think that's the biggest frustration I see is folks who just want to do real estate deals without understanding the industry that's supporting that real estate.
Yep.
What's the industry that's utilizing that infrastructure, and how do they utilize it? And when you understand that and can connect those dots, it's amazing how many ways you can create value for a client. And so, I want people that are going to find those resources that they want to learn from, be it a developer, be it a hospital executive, or, a physician leader that they want to know asking questions. What are they thinking about every day? And then you'll connect the dots on the real estate.
I think I started in the real estate business. I think it took me 20 years to really start seeing the big picture, if you will. It takes a long time. It's not tomorrow.
Yeah. I didn't think I realized you were in real estate before.
Yeah. I mean, I started on the acquisition and disposition side of real estate, and certainly, we were involved here when I was just out of college with basically a lease, what's the land worth with a hospital on it?
Right.
What's it worth with a different type of use on it?
Right.
And I had a boss at the time who liked screaming, and I won't say his name because he's old. You already know. I've just reminded you of who it was.
Now I remember. Yes.
And so, I think it's interesting how that started you down the journey. How do you know? We kind of flipped. You started on the device side. I started on the real estate side.
Right.
But device gave you a significant view. You got to walk into the OR,
right,
and see and hear, and you learn so much from just seeing and hearing. I almost wish. It's kind of how we did it. For 10 years, they just let you just wandered around,
right?
And then somehow your bills were paid. I don't even know how we made it through the first 10 years. Someone paid us.
Right.
But I'm I don't know who it was, and I don't think we made very much money.
I didn't have very big demands back then either. Yeah.
I remember those days.
Yeah.
Yeah.